Okay, so here at Newlab, we're a growing community of experts and innovators really focused on applying emerging technologies to help solve pressing and complex challenges. Put the emphasis on growing there intentionally because that's what we're here to talk about today, is how can we help you grow? How can we invite you into the community that we're developing? So the transformative technology that Newlab engages with really falls largely into about 8 different categories. So we support hardware-focused teams, but we also work with software companies, and then we work with those that are kind of at the intersection of both. So we've got robotics companies, connected systems, AI, material science, blockchain, additive manufacturing, even quantum computing, and of course, computer vision, which is the focus of today's discussion. So Newlab offers really 2 primary ways to get involved with what we're doing here. We have membership, which is about the community of companies that we support. And then we have our studios, which is actually admittedly where I spend most of my time. And our studios are Newlab's answer to innovation programming, where we can partner up with Fortune 500 companies, with government agencies, with civic stakeholders, and really build a kind of custom engaged ecosystem around specific problem areas or specific opportunities where we can apply emerging technology to move that industry forward, to move that city or kind of that set of constituents forward in the best way possible. So let's start with a closer look at our community. We've been around for just over 4 years, and our community has certainly grown quite a bit in that time. We've had over 1,700 companies apply to be part of Newlab, so that's where that kind of 10 to 15% acceptance rate number comes from. And we've built a set of resources in this time really to support members in taking their product from napkin sketch to a manufacturing ready prototype on site here. And that's in part thanks to that $5 million plus of equipment that we have on site here. Ensuring that our community has the right access to capital is definitely top of mind for us. And that's really why we work to maintain relationships with a diverse network of funders. So we've got VCs, family offices, corporate VCs, a whole range of early stage investors who are looking to Newlab for deal flow. And really, we take it seriously. How can we best understand where you're at in your business today and what kind of capital support could help you move to the next level? To date, that has resulted in our membership community raising north of 700 million, seeing a kind of cumulative valuation of just about 2.6 billion. And we've also seen some acquisitions during that time. So all good indicators. So our community is based out of 2 primary spaces here in Brooklyn. We have our headquarters, which I'm standing in right now. And then we have 77 Washington, which you see on the middle of that slide. And that space is designed to be a landing pad for companies that may have outgrown this space. So that's a good sign for us. If you've outgrown us and you're looking to kind of build your own culture, take up a whole floor, continue to kind of grow as part of the Newlab network, 77 Washington is a great home for that. More recently, we've expanded into Detroit, Michigan. So we've expanded so far with the launch of 2 studios focused on mobility and the future of transportation in partnership with Ford and Michigan Central. And a space for members is going to follow kind of that launch of those studios. So we'll have headquarters back here in New York, and we'll also soon have a space up and running in Detroit. So let's take a closer look at our headquarters here. So 84,000 square feet. We're actually in a former shipbuilding factory, which is pretty cool when you think about it. This building dates to about 1902 and has a pretty rich history as being really part of New York's heart of manufacturing and innovation. And when our founders stepped into this space a number of years ago, they were awed by the proportions and kind of the history that this building had. And we're really inspired to think about how could it once again be part of the heart of innovation for New York City and the heart of advanced manufacturing. So that feeling of history and of the space itself is definitely present for our members. And this space houses all of our prototyping facilities. So we've got, like I said, that's $5 million worth of prototyping equipment on site here. We also have a number of convertible spaces ranging from flex desks to full offices. And so we, in addition to these kind of workspaces, we're also providing members with access to bookable conference rooms, an in-house cafe, on-site IT support, mail service, lockers, bike parking. We want it to be, not only an inspiring place to work, but also convenient and kind of filled with the amenities that make sense for you on a daily basis. As I alluded to before, 77 Washington is the second building here in Brooklyn. It's located about a 10-minute walk from our headquarters, and that offers 22,000 square feet of workspace spread across 6 stories. So, of course, over the last year, life has looked pretty different for most of us, for all of us, I'd venture to say. And we've needed to adapt our operations to keep our members safe and to enable them to keep making progress and to count on Newlab as a place and as a set of resources to help them do so. So more than 1 month before New York entered its first reopening phase this past spring, we actually implemented a program here to safely return a number of our member companies to this space. So those companies had essential business designation, and we needed to help them get back to work. Nowadays, we're seeing an average of about 150 people in the space every day. So you can probably hear some voices around me and some machines whirring in the background. And we remain really committed to maintaining a safe space for all of our members. So we're still doing contact tracing, temperature checks, daily disinfections of our space. I filled out a survey this morning before I could get into the building. And then our facilities and our operations team are working with members to make sure that spaces are reconfigured so that people can safely maintain social distancing while still doing their work. And we actually used this opportunity and kind of the new reality of our work environment as a chance to partner with some member companies. So we partnered with a company that's part of our community here called Strong Arm. And you'll see in the little video that's playing, there's wearable devices that we've made available to people on site. They provided haptic feedback. So if you were getting within 6 feet of someone, you would hear something and you would see something and be alerted to that. And it also just provided another anonymous and safe way to help us in our contact tracing. Norbert Health is another company that's part of the Newlab family, and they stepped up to deploy sensors to passively monitor essential vital signs, temperature, breathing rate, heart rate. So just another way that we're outfitting the space to really be a safe place for people to work. Okay, so take a sip of water. Let's talk more about the community and the benefits and really all the value that this can bring for you. So this snapshot here really helps to tell the story of Newlab's member growth. So like I said, we've been around for about 4 years, and in that time, Newlab has grown from just 23 startups to over 160 companies that we support today. And the valuation collectively of that group has moved from 175 million to more than 2.6 billion today. So when you think about kind of what that looks like on a day-to-day basis here, that's the difference between 60 entrepreneurs in our space to today having 800 engineers, entrepreneurs, and inventors. At the same time, the aggregate value of our members has also risen significantly. So the average company value grew from where we started, about 7.5 million, to where it is today, which is about 17.5 million. We've also seen a range of acquisitions. Probably the most notable is a company called Jump that was acquired by Uber several years ago. And these stats are really important to us because they indicate that the resources that we're bringing to members are helping them to grow and scale effectively. So these are not just numbers on a piece of paper to us. They signify that the things and the people and the effect of being part of this Newlab community is working for entrepreneurs working in emerging technologies. The other thing to keep in mind is that we're a dynamic community and we're supportive. And that's really what we set out to foster. And it's been great to see that in practice. So for members, this means that you can find experts in a range of different topics and learn from the people around you. So you've got plenty of people here who have masters and doctorates, and really specialize in quite different and complementary fields, which really lends to this multidisciplinary collaboration that we see every day. We also have a lot of serial entrepreneurs who are part of the community. So they've successfully fundraised, they've been in your shoes, and they've worked through the growing pains of scaling a business, supply chain, figuring out manufacturing. And so as much as our team might sometimes have answers, we really encourage peer-to-peer mentorship and connection. And we actually provide a set of tools to help facilitate this as well. Also, I'll just quickly note on this slide that 38% stat that you see on the right-hand side there. That's important to us because we're invested in really being part of the fabric of New York's tech community for the long term. So when we see that 38% of founders have actually relocated to the city to be part of what we're building, that's a great sign to us. Also want to call out that 23% female founders. Clearly there's still room to grow, but I have to say we're proud to see how this statistic is really outpacing the macro trends that we're seeing in the tech industry. But diversifying the community here is top of mind for us this year. So let's talk a little bit more about that collaboration. It's been fantastic to see, again, at kind of a product development level, how this is coming to fruition for companies on a daily basis. So one of these examples is Jump. They joined Newlab very early on in their life. They were known at that time as Social Bicycles, and they were building a smart lock dockless bike share system for cities. And eventually they brought a pedal assist e-bike to the market as Jump. But in their early days, they partnered up with their neighbor here at Newlab, Voltaic, to design a custom solar panel to actually power that bike lock. And that's really indicative of how Voltaic and many other members here support their peers. So Voltaic is a great team. They actually tend to serve as kind of the in-house solar experts, helping teams to assess, can they power something through solar? If so, what does that look like? How do you bring your connected system online with solar power? Just quickly, another example is Clip and 10x Beta. So Clip develops an adaptive system to convert traditional bikes into e-bikes, and they partnered with 10x Beta, which is our in-house design and engineering firm, which, like the name says, you can probably guess what they do. They're really great at taking something from 0 to 1 and to helping companies like Clip to get their product designed and ready for manufacture. So we facilitate these network connections across members in a number of different ways. So of course we do curated introductions, and Haley, our community manager, whose email will pop up at the end of this, is really fundamental to providing those introductions and spending time with each of you to really understand where are you at as a business, who would be kind of most helpful within the network for you to get to know. We also have programming, so exclusive to our members, making sure that you have access to advisors and subject matter experts on a regular basis to discuss your product roadmap or growing a team, navigating IP. We pride ourselves on not being a curriculum-based kind of generic place to learn about startup methodology, but having those workshops on a regular basis is important to make sure that you're getting that consultation when you need it. We also have an operating system for our members. So that supports the member experience, helps you find each other through a member directory, and also includes kind of the way that you book conference rooms and prototyping consultations and access some of the resources on site here. Then we have a Slack community. I have to say it's really fun to pop into the Slack and see how people are doing everything from kind of finding their next hire to sourcing a piece of equipment that they need on a prototype they're actively working on, dealing with supply chain logistics. Is kind of all up for discussion in that peer-to-peer community. Our team is also here to support members. So we have about 30 people on the Newlab team, and there's a lot of different backgrounds, and we love to make ourselves available through office hours, but frankly also just on a daily basis, just an email away. And we've got expertise ranging from Lynn, who of course is all things marketing, paid PR, brand development, Satish, who I work quite closely with, who has a technical and scientific background, Sean, our CEO, loves to talk to teams about management, scaling, biz ops. Francesco is our kind of in-house AI expert. He's actually growing his business here at Newlab. He's incubating it here. It's called Applied Excel. But all things AI and computational journalism, he is very excited to talk to you about. And then Jared on the kind of finance, venture, business model side of things, and Boris, who you see here, who's the head of our product realization team. And myself, I have a background in kind of cities and technology and where the rubber meets the road with those things. So I was happy to talk to teams about that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our studios and really how they could be a source of support for you or an inroad into what we're doing. So the framework for our studios is really about aligning on the right problems to solve and creating specific opportunities for startups to come to the table and work on those challenges. So we open up these opportunities through open calls, several of which are live right now, to startups and teams from around the world. But we bring these opportunities first to our membership and really work with members to understand whether the studios present a kind of unique opportunity for them given where they're at today. So just quickly, we have our corporate side of our studio portfolio here. So we have a range of studios running in partnership with corporations. And I'll just talk through a couple of these. In our 5G studio, which is in partnership with Verizon, we have an on-site testbed at Newlab with an ultra-wideband 5G network, which is awesome because it means that we can support teams that are building next-gen applications for industrial automation, energy, and transportation. And we have an open call live for that studio right now. So if that speaks to you, I encourage you to visit our website and take a look at that and consider applying. In our prospect mining studio this month, we're also seeking companies. In that studio, the focus is on technologies that can be applied across the full value chain of mining to improve sustainability, efficiency, and safety. And then our mobility studio, I referenced that just very quickly before, but that's in partnership with Ford, and we're really looking at our full mobility feature: autonomous, connected, electrified, shared. What does that look like in practice, and how do we test out exciting new concepts and kind of figure out how to scale those? In the civic side of our studio portfolio, we're actively seeking companies right now for our accessible streets studios. And that program is really about focusing on Detroit residents as the users and understanding where are their transportation breakdowns today and how can emerging technology and kind of new services come to the table to improve quality of life for Detroit residents across different neighborhoods. So things like improving access to mobility information, fostering safe and welcoming streets, bridging public transportation gaps, thinking about not just how do you make it easier for someone to reach essential resources, but how might you actually make it easier for essential resources to come to the person. And then lastly, our Circular City Studio is a partnership with the City of New York. And in that program, we tackle the city's sustainability agenda. And we'll talk about that a little later with Jessie, because CARMERA has participated in that program. And then I'd be remiss not to call out our Beyond Place studio, definitely the furthest afield geographically. That's a studio where we're working in partnership with refugees at the Nakavale settlement in Uganda to prototype and imagine and build new models for dignified housing and vibrant public spaces. Okay, so going back for a minute to our product realization and prototyping resources here at Newlab. These are really designed to be a shared set of resources for members. You guys have 24-hour access, and each shop really contains state-of-the-art equipment to facilitate your workflow from that initial design to a working prototype. And we really want to be there for you to kind of work on multiple projects at once and helping you to quickly go from hypothesis to implementation, testing, and refinement. And we have a team in-house who supports that, offers modular curriculum, and also full service fabrication. So just quickly, you'll see there kind of the range of on-site resources that we have. We have a wood and metal shop, finishing and casting rooms, CNC, equipment, textiles, electronic labs, DigiFab space, and newly online, an ag tech lab with grow chambers and controlled environments. Okay, let's talk about investment for a moment. So we know access to capital is really critical for our members, and we have a network of over 400 early stage investors to support you. We work really first to understand where are you at, what kind of capital makes sense for you, and then we collaborate with organizations like Google X and New York Angels to create opportunities for our members to demo their work and seek investment. So that includes quarterly pitch sessions where you could get feedback from the Google X team and kind of be considered for future partnership or even investment there. And with New York Angels, we, on a twice yearly basis, host pitch days for Newlab members to present their work. And AliCorp is a new partner for us and very excited to have them in the fold as well. In terms of other benefits that we bring to our members, we negotiate rates on behalf of our community, frankly, so that we can get the most favorable rate for you on services that are relevant to the work that you're doing and the day-to-day operations of your business. So great if we all have fantastic prototyping equipment, but if we don't have the resources we need to get packages out on time or deal with HR or some of the day-to-day operations of running a business, it's all part of the picture and we need to consider that. So let's talk now about different types of membership and the application process. So we have 4 types of membership at Newlab. On the left side, you'll see the Flex program. So Flex membership at Newlab means you can come here every single day. You have access to the programming we've been discussing. The only thing that you don't have at that level is a dedicated desk, and you can do that option with or without access to prototyping labs and resources here. And then we have dedicated desk memberships, and then from all the way up to private offices for teams of about 50 people. We're also increasingly obviously working with members around the world on a virtual basis. So if you're not located in New York or not looking for a new office space per se, would certainly still encourage you to think about what membership at Newlab could bring to you. So maybe you're interested in joining the community. Certainly hope so. I'm imagining that's what brought you here today. So I want to just show you quickly kind of how we look at applicants. So first, when we look at applications, we're really trying to just understand, who are you? What's your team about? What are you building? What's the specific stage of your development? We, of course, want to dig deep on the technology, understand the ambition and the viability of what you're building, and then make sure, frankly, that's a match with the resources that we can offer. And we also take to heart, making sure that we're not creating too much direct competition across our membership community. And we also consider, what's your point of view? So that social responsibility kind of speaks to that. We think a lot about, if you're successful at scaling your work into the world, what does that mean for the world? What kind of positive impact are you potentially creating? Okay, so this slide I'll just move through very quickly. We have 3 companies. So when we talk about computer vision cohort at Newlab, there's a range of different companies to talk about. We've got Norbert Health, I mentioned them earlier. Lexset, great company, really building a foundational platform to support AI development. And Numina, which deploys its hardware to help measure street activity in cities. And then that brings me to CARMERA. So Jessie Lazarus is going to be joining us this afternoon to tell us more about CARMERA and what their team is up to, and also just give us a little bit more color into day-to-day life as a Newlab member. So I'll bring Jessie into the conversation here.
Hi.
Hey, Jessie. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really an honor to help celebrate Newlab and talk about our experience there.
Thank you. So we've got the boilerplate language for CARMERA up on the screen here, but why don't you tell us about CARMERA in your own words? What are you guys about, and as well as your background? I think that would be interesting for the group.
Yeah, totally. So CARMERA is really a next generation street level spatial intelligence company. We sort of launched our first product, which is high definition mapping for autonomous vehicles, and really designed it with this sort of problem of change management in mind. So all autonomous vehicles need a high definition map to navigate and understand the world about them. But the challenge, and these are non-trivial things to build, but really the challenge is, once you build it, how you maintain it. So taking advantage of sort of vehicular crowdsourcing and then other kinds of sort of spatial data that are now available, we've really sort of narrowed in on this very important problem and challenge of solving map maintenance, both for autonomous vehicles, but really all forms of mobility and all forms of navigation. Oh, right, and my background. So I joined CARMERA after we were Newlab members, actually. I think CARMERA's relationship with Newlab goes back to like 2017, so some of the earlier days. But before CARMERA, I was Chief Digital Officer for New York City and actually sort of watched Newlab become an idea and then turn into a reality. And so it's been amazing to, it's one of the ways that I found out about CARMERA actually, and it's been amazing to follow sort of Newlab and CARMERA's growth really, hand in hand in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember huddling on the couches up front here at Newlab back in 2017. I think it was like month 2 on the job for me, and sitting with Ro, the founder of CARMERA. You guys were just coming out of stealth mode, and he had to run me through the presentation a couple of times, so I really grasped what he was building. But it's been amazing to see kind of from that first conversation where you had spent so long really finessing and building out this technology, and then finding your market and figuring out, okay, how is this first going to present in the world? Of course, autonomy and AVs in cities is a longer path, but watching kind of how you're building these tools and then bringing them to market has certainly been fantastic. Maybe you could speak a little bit about kind of how Newlab has supported you at these different stages of your growth. We can certainly talk a bit about your participation in our Circular City Studio and kind of what maybe that helped you to unlock. But yeah, give us a little color into, as you've grown, what has it meant to be part of Newlab?
I think one of the things that's so key is that like physical space is something that I think startups, it's like not an easy thing to sort of put that together. And as you think about sort of real world urban sort of impact, which is very much at the heart of CARMERA's, mission and ethos, being like having a physical space to test and deploy in our own backyard. I mean, the 2 CARMERA founders are Brooklyn based and sort of were a part of the Brooklyn tech ecosystem. And so being able to sort of affiliate with Newlab and take advantage of the space really in your own backyard, I think is the first point. The other thing I would say is like the problem that CARMERA is seeking to solve is it's just harder to do in cities. And so having a place like the Navy Yard and Newlab situated within it, and Newlab's like sort of reach and resources within the city helped CARMERA both the sort of early testing and understanding like what does it take to get the hardware just right. What does it take to sort of get the data flow going and our pipeline, our computer vision pipeline sort of working at speed. So figuring out sort of some of the early testing and deployment there, and being so close to each other and where we need it, and not really being, like we joke all the time, it's like you can do this in Midtown, you can do it in Mountain View if you can do it in Midtown. And so the problem of density and kind of deploying these things in an urban environment really are magnified, and you need a real world testing environment for that. So Newlab was really like foundational in terms of getting those deployments out and getting them up and running and testing in the early days. And then once we sort of figured out like what the model would be, and I think a startup's journey is like constantly reassessing and reevaluating and sort of planning your next move. But as like along that path, I think that there are a few things that really stand out to me that were pivotal moments in our relationship or our growth as a company, but also and really directly relate to Newlab. And one is our participation in the Circular City Studio. That was pretty shortly after I joined CARMERA in the fall of 2018. And we had this theory that our data would not only be useful for autonomous vehicles, but they might also be useful for decision making from a public policy point of view and from an economic development point of view. Obviously, I'm biased, and my background coming from City Hall like really sort of had me thinking about this already. But it's a pretty risky proposition for a startup to kind of pursue that, given the revenue streams might not be there, and like how are
Totally.
you gonna invest the time and resources to figure out if this data might actually be useful to the sort of ancillary or tertiary like users. And they become users in the long term, but they're not sort of your core commercial focus immediately. And Circular City was a very structured, it sort of fell in our laps. It was this sort of like perfectly structured, like, cookie cutter way for us to share data with some of these other companies and with academics, all with the sort of promise of Newlab being able to bring these parties together. And it gave us like a very structured and straightforward way to test that hypothesis. And I would say, I'm happy to go more into detail about it, but I would just say that like that was great for us. It helped us understand that there really are very important use cases for this data that we believed but were important to test, that are sort of beyond our core commercial autonomous vehicle market. So we know that now. And then it also gave us, the opportunity to present to sort of the corporate sponsors and all of the other membership of Newlab. Like it just kind of turned into a little bit of a snowball in terms of great press for us, like great exposure. We found some of our some other sort of fleet partners through this experience, as well as great government stakeholder engagement and goodwill, which is always a benefit. So that's really like, I would say, the first moment for me. And just to your diversity point, Shayna, like earlier from the presentation, I remember like going to the Newlab, or sorry, the Circular City final presentation, and I was like, I think maybe secretly 10 weeks pregnant at the time, and stood up and realized that like everyone on stage who had a leadership role in Circular City was a woman, and feeling like, wow, this is so cool. And it would only happen in Brooklyn with this like very intentional commitment to that. So, yeah, just would say like Newlab has been a very warm and sort of welcoming place for me personally.
Amazing.
Yeah, and there are a few other, I can say, like, the next big thing I would say for CARMERA has really been our relationship with you, Shayna, and with Sean, and with so many of the staff at Newlab. Like, I consider you both mentors and absolutely like amazing resources, whether it's talking about some sort of like gov tech play or engagement with the city, or, for me personally, I lead the go-to-market team at CARMERA. And so being able to bounce ideas off Sean, who comes from Waymo and really like understands like the nuances of the frontier mobility market, has been just an invaluable, it's really just upside for us to have a relationship with Newlab in that way.
Amazing. Thanks for that, Jessie. Can you give us a little bit of a glimpse into what does 2021 and beyond hold for CARMERA? You've come a long way. What does this year look like for you guys in terms of product or continuing to expand into new markets or new use cases and segments?
Yeah, well, we are doubling down on change. And I think it's obviously a big buzzword for 2021. Everyone's excited for change in so many ways. But for CARMERA, change means focusing on the problem of change in street level incidents or change in map data. Basically, like we are focused on deploying at scale, that city scale, that sort of continental scale, that's sort of thinking about all of the different sort of moments and opportunities for change in map data, and then capturing that change and reflecting that change back into maps. And so as we think about like, what does that look like? And this has been the promise of CARMERA for so long, and we've had different kinds of products along the way, but we're going to soon be announcing and launching a new product. So I'm really excited to, I won't give you too much of a preview today, but I'm really excited to sort of say that like this big sort of focus on change and CARMERA's sort of change as a service offering is going to solve a pain point for not only autonomous vehicle customers and robot cars, but really users of consumer navigation, for ride hail, for mobility as a service, for sort of anyone who thinks about and turns to a map to organize their life and to orient themselves in the world. If that map is out of date, you'll be less efficient and less successful at doing that. And so solving that specific problem for just a variety of customers and use cases is something we'll have a lot more to say about very soon.
Fantastic. I love that. I guess kind of picking up on that for a minute, Jessie, admittedly, you're not necessarily on the technical side of CARMERA. There is a large technical team spread out both here on the East Coast and elsewhere in the country. Could you speak about kind of how did the two sides of your business work together to bring that product to market? And again, from a kind of Newlab perspective, I think your experience has been more on the business side, but just curious kind of how those sides of your business work together, kind of how they may have tapped into some of the resources here at Newlab.
Yeah, sure. So you're right. Our team, we have our Brooklyn, our CTO and our CEO, our two co-founders are based in Brooklyn, and then our chief product officer, and a lot of the product team is based in Seattle. And there's sort of a mapping ecosystem in Seattle, but New York is where a lot of the computer vision technology is. And so our CTO, Justin Day, was the former CTO of MakerBot. And so I feel like I joke, there's like this sort of MakerBot mafia, right? That's sort of percolated throughout New York City, and many former MakerBot employees and on the technical side, especially, are at CARMERA. And so I think that typically, like, you know, as I mentioned earlier, startups are always resource constrained, and choosing your focus and understanding like what the focus of the technical org should be. There's a constant feedback loop with the biz side. And I think that moments and opportunities like Circular City, where I can be justified in, you know, asking for a very specific data dump or a very specific niche question because it's been so de-risked by our participation with Newlab, and there isn't sort of the same kind of uncertainty where if you're just going at it alone and trying to get market feedback. So it's been, I would say that like that real-time feedback loop is made just sort of easier, I think, and de-risked for everyone when you're doing things through the structure that Newlab has given us, particularly from a go-to-market point of view.
That's great. Yeah, I'm recalling, just remembering, I think last year around this time, when we were also gathering face-to-face, we had two members of the CARMERA team, someone from the technical side and then someone from the kind of partnerships BD side, who joined us for a day-long session with Avis Budget Group to kind of rethink the future of their business. And it spanned both those worlds, right? So from the technical side, how could you start using emerging technology in more interesting ways to make more from kind of what they were doing in their core business? But then on the other side, what's the model for that? And kind of how do you think about actually taking that product or service to business? So having both of those CARMERA people in the room with us was certainly beneficial to kind of the learnings that Avis and our mobility studio continue to progress today.
Yeah, we still talk about that, Shana. I was on maternity leave then, but I kind of, you know, when people around the office mention this, it's like, oh, right, I wasn't there and I'm super jealous. But that moment where, so I didn't really describe our business model, but we partner with professional fleets. Like we partner with sort of the delivery companies, the mom and pop liquor distribution folks, even like guys who are servicing professional dishwashing equipment in sort of the restaurant and hotel industry. And so we have these fleet partners, and we mount basically our own sensor and hardware system on the roofs of those vehicles. And so that's a really sort of foundational part of our data collection efforts. And if you think about, like, Avis has this great incentive to figure out like what to do with this asset they have roaming around the streets. We have a sort of commercial reason to understand if they might be good partners for us. And then we have this like technical, you know, engineering and computer vision reason to understand, like, actually, what is the angle of those cameras? Should they be sitting? Like, what does the fleet look like? And like, how would we optimize that whole system end to end? And so bringing our director of marketing and our founding engineer into that meeting with Avis, I think there were a lot of epiphanies on sort of all three sides of the table in that way. And it's just like, it drives efficiency and decision making, and in you know, customer feedback and in product feedback, and really helps that feedback loop that I was describing earlier.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jessie. I guess one final question for you. If somebody's part of the New York tech community, obviously there's a lot of different resources they can tap into. We think a lot about how we're contributing to the ecosystem as a whole, and we certainly refer companies all of the time to fellow programs, and we hope to really be a landing pad for companies that are emerging from different accelerators, incubators, tech transfer, commercialization programs at universities. But what would you say to someone, you know, a peer comes to you who's part of a great emerging tech startup, they're looking for kind of where to land? What would you say to them in terms of what Newlab provides versus maybe some of the other resources that are out there?
Yeah, well, I think I would say there are a few points. Number one is just like, and this is maybe not the most important, but I think it does kind of, the physical space is absolutely stunning and motivating and inspiring, and like there's room to breathe. You're sort of like in this, I think, wonderful large scale cocoon is kind of how I feel when I'm there. It's like this very nurturing and wonderful place, but people are doing serious, like hard problems. So it doesn't feel like, I think, some of the fluffier office environments that are also claustrophobic with bad air circulation. You know, you can imagine like New York office space. So you're kind of getting away from that. But really more practically, just from a sort of day-to-day, how to advance your product, and as a startup sort of going along that journey, the team at Newlab is like constantly a source of feedback, you know, good and bad, that I think we really rely on, as well as the other companies there. You know, we've partnered our circular city experience. We were partnering with CitySense and Numina, and we found sort of like, you know, just these great relationships that I think are really important as you embark on the startup journey and are thinking about like, what is the next step once you've gotten to a place you're looking for a step out space. Like you need more sort of camaraderie and ways to partner, or even just sort of commiserate with folks. So I think there's a social element. But really, as I think about like what is Newlab in the city of New York, it's like, it really, to me, is kind of the you know, the home base for really hard frontier tech, like the hardest problems that people are trying to solve in New York. And I think you saw this through, you know, if you followed anything about the city's response to the early days of COVID and like, how are we going to get ventilators out? It's like Newlab can solve that, you know, just give, like, let's get this infrastructure and ecosystem just the resources it needs, and they'll solve the problem. And I think that like thinking about Newlab's role in the future of New York, I think it's a critical part of a post-COVID and a sort of fully recovered New York City. And I think that the startups there is really like, that's where the city, when policymakers in City Hall or at EDC are thinking about like, well, who's solving this problem? They just turn to Newlab and they call Shayna and they call Sean. It's like, you know, what's going on? You know, how can we solve this problem? They go there for solving like the hardest problems. And I think that's the kind of community that shows up to Newlab and joins Newlab. And so I think that, you know, as we think about like, what's your next move and why go there? It's because I think that's where everyone who's, you know, trying to solve the tough problems goes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jessie. Those are very kind words. I do want to pop up on the screen this last slide. So for anyone who's still with us, newlab.com/membership will have a lot of the resources that we discussed today. And my colleague, Haley Robinson, is eagerly awaiting any emails that you have, any questions that she can further answer. I know she's been popping up in the chat throughout to address a number of questions live. But we hope this is just a starting point and to continue the conversation with many of you in the days to come. So thanks again, Jessie, for your time and insight.
Thanks.
And I'm going to sign off here.